We're on Daf Mem Hey Amid Beis. We're by Amar of Nachman Amar Shmuel, about 12, 13 lines down from the top. So again, let's just recap what we had said up to this point. We were talking about a sachir who comes to collect his money, and the Balabayas denies him. He says, I already paid you. So we said in the Mishnah, this is an example, this is one of the examples from the Mishnah of someone where the claimant, the teveya, in this case it's the worker, makes the shvua to be mitzi mammon from his opposite number. And the Gemara had explained the reason, which essentially came down to because the balabayas can get confused about who he paid and who he didn't. So therefore, we had a lot of back and forth. So why does he make a shvua? But that's the nugget. That's the main point of why the shvua gets moved over from the nitin, which is normally the case, right? A moedah mix is always the person who has a claim against him makes a shvua not to pay. We always say a moedah mechaver lavaraya. So the one you're trying to be mitzvah from makes a shvua and he doesn't have to pay. But over here, the chum were misakin that the sacher pays. This din that we said that the worker makes a shvua to be mitzi the mammon to get to his salary is only where there are edim that he was originally hired. But if there are no edim that he was ever hired, he could, the boss does have the ability, the balabayas as he's called, has the ability to get out of the shvua, to stop the seicher from the sachir from making a shvua. If there's no proof that he ever hired him in the first place, he could say, I don't know who you are, get out of here. And it makes sense if you think about it. If a sachir can always make a shvua to be mitzi mammon, and he goes up to a balabayas and he says, you owe me $1 million, I'm a very highly paid nuclear physicist, and the guy says, I don't know who you are, and then the sachar makes a shvua, that would obviously be problematic. Rabbi Yitzchak Yasha. Rabbi Yitzchak says, you're correct. And Rabbi Yochanan also agrees with this. I heard from Rabbi Yochanan, he also paskins. It's only where there are edim that he was originally hired. So tomorrow, Mechlal the Polygalera Rish Lakish. Does that mean Rish Lakish was chaylik, since we're quoting from Rabbi Yochanan, and Rish Lakish just instinctively always argues with Rabbi Yochanan? Igad Amri Mishta Havashasi Le Vishasikle. One says that he was waiting around. That means that Rish Lakish was being quiet. I'm sorry, he was middle of drinking something, and he didn't have a chance to say anything, and he never said anything, and it was not necessarily the case that he was chaylik or not chaylik. We don't know what he what he felt. Another version was that he was waiting. Rish Lakish was waiting, but he never said what he had to say on this topic. So now we have, in addition, we have before for Nachman Amar Shmuel, we also have B'Shem Rav Menashe by Zvid Amar Rav. So we have both Rav and Shmuel both agree to this concept that a taina of that where a employee comes and says I wasn't paid, he's only be able to make a shvua, like our Mishnah said, if there are edim. Amar Rami Bar Chama, Kama Malya Hashmaitz. So this is a wonderful thing. It certainly makes it's to be praised. This insight. Amalei Rava, my Mal Yusa. Rava asked the question: is this really so good? Im Kain Shua Shaimrim the Chayv Rachmana Heichim Ishkachasla. L'chayra, I can make this same migu that you're saying that the balabayas can say, I never hired you, and therefore he could avoid having the sachir make a shvua to be moitzi mammon. You could have it by every shvua shemim. One of the shvuas deraisa is a shvua that a shemer makes when the balabaya says, my object, the thing, my pekadon that was by you, you were negligent with it, and the shemer says no, it was an oinus, so he has to make a shvua. The Gemara says, how will you ever have that the shemer will make a shvua? Just like the Shaimer could say, I don't have to make a shvua. I never had this object. I don't have your object altogether. He could say it's my object. So he could also say nensu, and he should be believed if you follow this what Rav and Shmuel said. And for the Gemara, the afkad le'edim, it's talking about a specific case. It's only talking about a case where it's known we have edim that there was originally a pikadon from Reuven to Shimon, and therefore Shimon doesn't have a migu that he could have said, I never got this object from Reuven. So he doesn't have a migu, so therefore that's why he has to make a shvua shayim that it was nent.
So where are we?
We are on Mem Hey Amid Beis, about 10 lines from the bottom. Mitoch sheyachal loyma lehechzat elach. Correct the Gemara. Mitoch sheyachal loyma lehechzat elach yachal loyma lehnen. So, there's a different, in addition to the migu that we suggest that the balabayas can say, I'm sorry, the shomer could say that I never got this thing from you; it's mine from the beginning. So he said it's talking about we gave it to Beidim, but he has a second migu. He could say, yeah, you know what? I already gave you back the thing that you lent me. You have a that I borrowed, that I took a pekadon from you, but I already returned that pekadon, and this thing that got broken is a different thing. So the afkad le'bishtar. No, it's talking about we gave it in the beginning with a star, and the rule is that when you give something, when you take a pekadon with a star, you have to return it with edim. As Gemara, Michlal the Travayus Svirlu, we can see from the context of what we've just answered, we're saying that if he's mafked to him by edim, he doesn't have to be machsa with edim, because we said even after we said he gave it to him with edim, even after Reuven gave the pekadon to Shimon with edim, Shimon can still claim hechzartivlach. Okay, so I got the original pekadon, but I could the Gemara's second time it was, but he could still claim that he was machzer to him. So vice versa, he doesn't have to. It's not required, even though it was lent to him with edim, he doesn't have to return with edim. And then we said b'shtar tzarich lahachzar b'edim. But then since we answered, it's talking about where there was not just edim, it was a shtar. So we see that when you borrow something with a shtar, then you must return it with edim, because that was how we answered the second meeting. Zakdumar. Kari Rami Bar Chama led Rav Sheshes. Vayasam David said Varm Be'ela Beliba. He said about Rav Sheshes that Rav Sheshes inquired in great detail, as we're going to see over the next Amid, on this din that we said in the Mishnah, that a sachir, a hired worker, or an uman that claims he wasn't paid, can make a shvua to be moitzi mam. The Ashkechei Rav Sheshes l'Rav Bar Shmuel. Rav Sheshes family came across Rav Bar Shmuel. Amalei tani man midi b'sachar. He says, have you learned anything about this topic of sachar? It's a very difficult sugya. What do you know about it? Amalei in. He said, yes, Tanina. We learned in the Brisa. Sachir bizmanei nishba v'noita. A sachir, if it's at the time that he's supposed to be paid, as we said in the previous Amud, once the Zman of Piroyin passed by, then we already have a second cheshbon that we say the Balabayas would not have been over on Bal Salin. It's a Isser D'Oraisa to delay paying back a a worker. So a sacher bismana, if he pays in the right times, nishba v'naitel. That's the din of our Mishnah. That a sacher who claims he wasn't paid, he can make a shua to get the money. Ketzad bisman she'amal eschatani v'lo nasat elischari. It's if it's bisman, meaning at the right time. At the time that he said that, we'll say Reuven is the worker and Shimon is the balabas. So bisman she'amaloi, when Reuven said to Shimon, "Schatani, you hired me, you didn't pay me my money." And Shimon says back to him, "No, I did hire. It's true, I hired you, but I already paid you." That's when we say that Reuven can make a shavua to get his salary, to get his pay from Shimon. But if the machlekes is not whether Shimon paid Reuven at all, if the discussion between Reuven and Shimon, the point of conflict is not whether Reuven was paid, but rather Reuven says, "You promised to pay me $2, and Shimon answers back, "I hired you, and you worked for me, but all I promised to pay you was one." In that case, it's Amoitim Echavera Olavaraya. But so this is the case of Kaitzitz, where the question is not about whether he was originally paid, but whether how much the agreement was for, how much was supposed to be paid. So in that we say Amoitim Echavera Olavaraya, that Shimon is going to be able to say, I don't have to pay, and I'm going to make a shvua that I don't have to pay. It's going to go back to the regular din that I might say mechaver alavaraya. It's l'chayra only with a shvua. And so the Gemara. So the Gemara. So what are we bringing from this? So the Sefer Beraya, since this second din, Lagabi Katzatzti, where they're disagreeing about how much was owed. We're saying it's talking about that he has to bring a raya. Havi reisha b'loy raya. Vice says I mean, is that if Reuben's going to want to win, he's going to have to bring an aid to prove his case. Otherwise, Shimon can get away. He's going to be able to deny it and make a shua. So Vice says the same raya reisha. I'm sorry. How could it be that the Reisha is talking about, from the fact that the Sefer is Baraya, that's right, it's mashma, that the Reisha is talking about where there were no Eidim saying that he had originally made the loan. For the fact that we say that by the Sefer...
That he hired him.
That he hired him, right. That means the Gemara is understanding that if in the Sefer we say that he has to bring a raya, that means that in the other case, there was no mention of a raya. That means there were no rayas on any part of it.
Which means it's not like Rav and Shmuel that he had to. You have
to bring Eidim.
He was hired.
I'm having trouble expressing this because the Gemara's answer is much more sensible to me. Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak Reisha v'Sefer Beraya. It says no. There was taka Eidim in the Reisha that said that Reuven had been hired to work for Shimon, like Rav and Shmuel, like we had concluded. The Raya the L'Shalom Ktani, but the Raya in the Sefer where you had to say that in order for Reuven to win, he has to bring a Raya. So we said Lagabi, him getting paid, he needs to bring a Raya. We said that you need to bring a Raya. Raya the Shmuel like Ktani, but the Raya, which is just a precursor, it's just a prerequisite in order for this discussion to happen, that there had to have been Eidim, that there was a what do you call it? That there was a pikadon given over, that allows Reuven to make a shvua. That raya we didn't discuss. That wasn't the subject of the Bryce. Saktima. Amr of Yirmiyah Barabba. Shochulei mi bei Rav l'Shmuel. Yilamdeinu Rabbeinu. Please teach us. Umen oimer shtayim katzatztili, v'lo oimer lo katzatzili achas. If Reuven, we're saying Reuven is the umen, Reuven is the worker, he says, I was promised to get paid $2 for my work, to fix this shoe. And Shimon answers back, no, all I promised to pay was one. Mi nishba. Who makes the shvur? Amalahen. Bezu yeshava balabayis v'yafsid umen. He says about this, in this case, the balabayis, meaning Shimon, who's the employer, he makes a shvur, and the umen loses out. We don't say the din of our Mishnah, like we said before, that we don't say the din of the Mishnah applies that the Chacham Misakin, because the Balabayas doesn't remember exactly who he paid and who he didn't. Over here we say it sticks to the regular din that Hamoitzi Mechaver Lavaraya, so the Balabayas will make a shvur and the umen will lose out. What's the reason? Because as far as how much was agreed upon, the agreed upon rate, that's not the same thing like we said before, that in our explanation of why we say that the employee, the worker, or Reuven in our example, makes a shvur to be Moitzi Mammon, that's because the Balabais gets confused. He has a whole bunch of workers. At the end of the day, he doesn't remember who he paid and who he didn't. But as far as how much he's paying each person, we don't have that cheshbon, and he does remember, and therefore, Shimon can make a shvur, the boss can make a shvur to avoid having to pay. In fact, the Gemara, any Vatani Rabba Bar Shmuel, Kotzatz Hamoitim Echavero Olavaraya. If they made up an amount of how much to pay, and they're disagreeing about that, but if the employee, if Reuven does not bring a raya, paka. But the Mashmoya says, if he doesn't bring a raya, he loses. He doesn't get paid. It shouldn't be that if it's katzas hamotzim mechaver lavaraya and that's it. It should be that the balabaya should be required to make a shvua. Why are we saying it as a pure din that it's a katzas hamotzim mechaver lavaraya, that unless he brings a raya he doesn't get paid? You still have to have a shvua. The l'chayra, the balabayas, Shimon doesn't get off scot-free. Amar Rav Nachman, let's study in Katani. No, it means to say you have to divide it up into two things. Oy maybe raya v'yitel. We're saying Reuven has an option. He could bring a raya if he brings Adim that they made up that he gets paid $2, and then he could get paid. If he doesn't bring a raya, then the balabais makes a shvur. We're not trying to say that the only option, the only protection for the employee is bringing a raya. It's also true that if he's not able to bring a raya, that the balabais has to make a shvur. Meisve, frek the Gemara. Hanoisen talisay le'umen. Brisa says, someone who gave his object to the umen.
That's not like what we were. I mean, it is not completely, but we said that the mitkar, the person, the employer remembers what they agreed to pay. We had said earlier.
Okay. Right. So how is that opposite of this?
The fact that he still has to make a shvur.
Right. So that was if you remember back, that was the whole discussion back and forth. Well, he's making a shvur because that's always the case when someone. This is the shvur d'Rabbanan, the shvur sasis. If someone asks for money and the person denies it, he makes a shvur d'Rabbanan to in order to. You don't just say "Amaytzim echaver" and he gets off scot-free. We always hold that if someone asks for money, that the person who's denying the money has to make a shvur. So So we
even though
start
there's a
with
logical
the
reason of why he would be believed, the employer, we still have him make a shua.
well, it's not so much that we have a reason why he's believed. That means there was a specific reason why he's not believed in the case of a sacher where he's saying I already got paid. Over here, we revert to the regular rule that someone who's claiming money, with some, I think it's pretty much universal that if someone asks for money and the other person denies it, midrabban he has to make a shua. So it's mitka de kiri is just to get us out of the situation where we switch it over. That's a second takana to switch it over. The general rule always is that the person who's denying and doesn't want to pay money is the one who makes a shua. But in the case where he doesn't remember, then we switch it to the plaintiff, to Reuven. Okay. Meisvei. Hanoisen talisei lu'umin. Someone who gave Shimon gave his talis to Reuven to fix it. Reuven says, "You promised to pay me $2 to fix your shoe or your talis." And Shimon says, "No, we only said one." Kol Zaman Shatalis Biyad is separate, in that as long as Reuven's hand, the Balabais has to bring a raya. He's not going to be able to be mitzi it altogether, because Reuven has a migo. He could say it's my talis, and there's nothing that Shimon could do about it. I don't understand this migo, because we say it's a migo. It's a migo that he's going to have to lie. He's going to have to claim something that's not his. It's one thing he has a migo that he could have gotten out of it by denying the claim, but now there's $100 talis. He's saying I could have kept the $100 talis. I guess it means I could give it back to him later. I'll give it to him as a present. But it seems like a strange migo to say that he could have stolen something from you. In any case, as long as he still has the talis, then there's nothing to talk about. The Baal Bais has no standing. But nafnaloi bismanoi, if at the end of the Reuven repaired the talis and then he handed it back to Shimon, and now they're having this argument about how much the agreed upon payment was. Nishba v'naitel. The Gemara says that Reuven is going to make a shvua to be mitzi the mammon from Shimon. Now this is obviously problematic. Until now we've been saying that when it comes to katzitza, when we talk about how much how much is owed, that it's hamaytze mechaver el varaya, and the shvu is on Shimon, not on Reuven. The Brisa continues, over zamanai, if it's past the time, hamaytze mechaver el varaya. Once it's past the time, then we go into that other issue that the Balabayish, Shimon has a taina that he says, I wouldn't have been over on Balsalin. It's unlikely that I didn't pay you. But the problem, so back to the middle case is the issue. It says if it's bismana, he is nishba v'noito. Amai yishava balabayis v'yafsid umen. We said that there's no nishba v'noito on a question of katzitza, because katzitza is mitka tekiri. When it's a question of how much, then we say he knows how much it is, and then there's no takana that it switches over to the sacher, to the employee. Rav Nachman Yitzchak says this is Rav Yehuda. Rav Yehuda is a chaylik. The Amar, Rav Yehuda has a din. Kol zman sheshavua noita eitzel balabayis sacher nishba v'noitel. He holds that there's an additional factor here that we haven't been paying attention to. That Rav Yehuda holds that since Shimon is saying, I only paid you one, I only agreed to pay one, and I paid you that one, and Reuven is saying, no, you agreed to pay two, so Shimon is agreeing that he owed something, that he owes him one. So he's a moida b'mixus, and therefore that means he's already mechuyev v'shua al moida b'mixus. So on the second one, right? He agreed he owes one, but he said, I don't owe the second. So he's a Maida Mixes, he agreed to pay half, and he's kaifer in half. So on that, Rabbi Yehuda holds that since the Shavua of the Balabayas, the Balabayas is not a regular person who just denies owing something, that Midrabanan or Misakin, anyone who denies has to make a Shvua Derabanan, but rather he has a Shvua Deraisa on him, and that the Chachamim were Misakin, that switches over. There's a stronger Chiv on the Balabayas to make a Shvua, meaning he's more responsible, he's more under the gun. We switch that, and so in that case, the Chachamim Misakin, that the Shvua goes, we benefit the employee, the worker, and we say he doesn't even have to be he's not at the mercy of the boss to make a shvua and avoid paying, but rather the employee can make a shvua and take the money. So hi Rabbi Yehuda. Who is this? Where do we see this of Rabbi Yehuda? Ilaim Rabbi Yehuda de Masnisin. If you'll say this is Rabbi Yehuda in our Mishnah, that means if you remember in the Mishnah we said right in the beginning of the Mishnah, Hasacher Ketzar. 4 lines into the Mishnah, the basic case of not a kaitzitz, but where they're arguing about whether he was paid or not, we say that the sacher makes a shvur to be mitzi. Rabbi Yehuda mixes hayda. Rabbi Yehuda says it has to be that there's a ma'id of mixes. It's kabalti dinner where the argument isn't whether Reuven was paid at all, but rather Reuven says they both agree that Reuven is owed $50, but Shimon says I already paid you $50, and Reuven says no, I only got $25. Sorry. Right. So Reuven says you owe me $50. The other one says I already gave you 25 and I only owe you 25. So they're arguing about whether whether Shimon has to pay 50 or has to pay 25. So he's a Maida mix. So maybe this is the Rabbi Yehuda where we see that Rabbi Yehuda holds that Legabi our case, Legabi Kaitzitz, which is not the same as the Mishnah, right? The Mishnah was talking about whether he was paid 25 or 50. They're arguing about how much Reuven received. Do we say is that the same thing as we're saying over here, that was where there's a Moida and Mixus in the Katzitza about what the original agreement was, that Yehuda is going to hold also that you always have to be, it's going to be Nishba v'Naitel. So no, Rabbi Yehuda over there is being machmer. That means in the Mishnah, when we're not talking about katzitza, we're talking about whether he was paid at all. The base din is that's not a good din. The ikar din is that Reuven has the ability, he has the benefit to make a shvuah and be noitel. And Rabbi Yehuda is saying, but that's limited. That if it's a moedim mixus, then it's only in the case of moedim mixus that he could do so. If it's not moedim mixus, then he can't. So the time Yehuda Machatesha mixus hayda, Yehuda the Bryce. I'm sorry. Yehuda the Masisa Chmurika Machmer. The time Yehuda Machatesha mixus hayda. Yehuda's din is coming to be machmer on the worker. He's saying only where it's a moedim mixus do you have the ability that you could be nishba v'naitel. But over here we're saying the other way around. We're saying that we're bringing a Rav Yehuda who holds that by katzitza you have wherever it's maida mixes that benefits, even though normally it would be that you say that the employer that Shimon can make a shvua, but where it's a maida mixes, so that's Shimon has more of a chiyuv to prove his point. Then the Reuven can make a shua to be mitzi. So our Mishnah is being machmir on Reuven, and this over here, I'm sorry, this brisa, right? This brisa is being makel on Reuven, and because of the maidav mixus, and our Mishnah we're being machmir on Reuven because of the maidav mixus. Ella, Rabbi Yehuda the Bryce. Rabbi Yehuda is a different Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda and the Bryce. The Tanya. Sacher, calls manchali loves manai, hareza nishba v'naita. This is the sacher. As long as the time hasn't passed when he's supposed to get paid, he could be nishba v'naita. V'em lav ain't a nishba v'naita. But if not, if the zman was not passed, he could be nishba v'naita. I'm Rabbi Yehuda. Amasai. When is this the case? Mansha amalei tein li schari chamishim dinner. Where he says, "Give me my 50 shkala that you have in my hands." Who I miskabalta my handin is up. He says, "No, you already received 25." Or it's not just the case of his kabalti, where it's a question of how much he was paid, which is similar to the case of the Mishnah. It's also if they're arguing about how much the original agreement was. And in both these cases, he's being maidim mixes. But if he denies it altogether, meaning that's not a maidim mixes, or he says, I hired you. He says, I didn't hire you altogether. Or I said, I never hired you. Or he says, I gave you all what you were entitled to. So Rabbi Yehuda is saying that this din that we said that he's nishba v'naitel is only when it's not a maidim mixes. I'm sorry, it's only when it is a maidim mixes. But if it would be a case where he's kaifer b'koil, then it's a maidim mechaber l'varai. So that is and we include in that not just the case of whether he hired him at the beginning or not, the case of our Mishnah. We're also talking about. He also brings up the case of Katzatzti, where they're arguing about how much they agreed from the beginning. Maskal of Shisha Breder Vida. Elakatzos Rabbi Yehuda. Elakatzos Rabbi Yehudi he Rabbanan. So you're trying to say that this din of Katzitza, when it was made up, that if it's Maidav and Mixus, that then that in that case he could be he's nishba v'naitel. That's only Rabbi Yehuda, but the Chacham disagree, and they say in the case of Maidav and Mixus, it's still Hamaitza Mechaver V'La'arya. Hashta Heich de Machmer Rabbi Yehuda Mikila Rabbanon in our Mishnah, where Rabbi Yehuda is Machmer, that Rabbi Yehuda requires that it be a Maidav and Mixus in order by the case of the Mishnah, which is the case not of Katzitza, but the case where they're arguing about whether he was paid or not. Yehuda requires there to be a Maidav and Mixus in order for Reuven to be Nishba v'Naitel. The Rabbanan Mekel, they say even without a Maidav and Mixus, he's Nishba v'Naitel. Heicha the Mekel Rabbi Yehuda. In this case, by Katzitza, we're saying Yehuda is Mekel, and he says that whenever it's a Maidav and Mixus, the employee Reuven can be Maitzi Mammon. Machmi Rabbanan, the Rabbanan are going to say no, he can't be Maitzi Mammon. It's like the Mar about Lamai Rabbanan. So now you're going to see. So what are you going to say? You're going to say the Rabbanan agree with Rabbi Yehuda that wherever it's Maidav and Mixus, it's Nishba v'Naitel. Elahada Tani Rabba Bashmuel Katzat Hamaitzi Mechaver Olav Haraya. We said if it's by Katzitza, that Hamaitzi Mechaver is Olav Haraya, that he doesn't, that it's not Nishba v'Naitel. But according to if we're saying now the Rabbanan agree with Rabbi Yehuda that where it's Maidav and Mixus, it's Nishba v'Naitel. Mani la Rabbi Yehuda v'la Rabbanan. This is not like either one. Elam Rav Hakam if Yehuda Sava b'deraisa Avdulei Takanta l'Sach. Yehuda holds that we have a Shvua Deraisa because he's a Maidav Mixus. So the Rabbanan the Chachamim were misaken that since there's already a Shvua, there's already incumbent on the Seicher, the Balabas, to make a Shvua Midaraisa. So then the Chachamim misaken that they flip over that Shvua and give it over to the Sacher, to Reuven, and he could be Nishba v'Naitel. Of the Rabbanan, but if it's not a Maidav Mixus, well, there's no Chi of Shua Deraisa, have it Takanta, but Takanta lo Yavdinan. They hold, if Yehuda holds, you don't make a Takana for a takana, and therefore you don't make a double takana, gzera l'gzera. So it's only by your mixus that is nishba v'noitel, but not where there's no nishba v'noitel. The Rabbanan will disagree, and they'll say no. It's all kula chad gzerahi. That's always the mahalach. It's all one takana. It's not a problem, even when it's a b'derabbanan. It's not just when it's a ma'ida mixus. Like we said in the Mishnah, even if it's derabbanan, even if it's only a shua derabbanan, it's nishba v'noitel. And what about the case where they're arguing about how much by Katsitsa? That they say that there's no takana over there, because they say mitka kiri, the person knows how much it is, and Rabbi Yehuda disagrees with that. He says no, I don't think that it's mitka kiri. They could even get mixed up about how much it was, and therefore there's takana on that as well. Okay, let's. I think we can learn in the next 5 minutes. We could learn up a bit of the next Amud. We said in the Mishnah also, when Nigzal, someone who had money stolen from him, which we said was a case where Reuben went into Shimon's house. Reuben had lent money to Shimon, and he went into Shimon's house and he said, "I'm going to get a mashkin from Shimon," which he's not allowed to do. That's gazela. And then he comes out with something. We say Shimon can make a shvuah to be mitzi the moment to take away from Reuben what he took. How do we know that even though Reuben went into the house and he said, "I'm going to go take a mashkin," how do you know that's what he did? Someone who's holding a hammer in his hand, or an axe. I'm going to chop down his cherry tree. And they go and find the tree is chopped down, but they didn't see him chop it down. We don't say that he has to pay for ruining the tree. Just because he said he's going to do it doesn't mean he's going to do it. You're not allowed to chop down someone's tree, so we don't assume that he did. He was boasting. He was talking. Maybe someone else did it, so we don't assume. So over here, even though this guy said, "I'm going in to take the mashkin," maybe he wasn't telling the truth. Gemara says no. We're talking about with his. We're not talking about where he's just said, "I'm going to go in," but we don't know what actually happened. We're talking about where there were Edom that saw he went into the house and took something. If we're talking about where there's Edom, what do we need the nigzal to make a shavua to be mitzi mammon? Just have the Edom testify about what he took. Where's the makom for a shua? There's Edom. We're talking about where the Edom saw him go in. He said he's going to be masking something. He saw him go in and take something, but he has stuff underneath his clothing that the Edom didn't see what he took. So they don't know if that's the mashkin or not. That's what he stole. Rabbi Yehuda says they saw that he hid things under his cloak and he went out. And the taina of the person who took it is he's saying, I bought them. So the Nigzal is saying, I lent it to him, and he's claiming that they're his, but it's not true. He's saying, I just lent them. And the person who took them is saying they were bought. So he says, when he said, in that case, he's not believed. He's not believed to say that they were bought. But this din that was saying that someone who claims that something that he had underneath his clothing, he's saying is lakuchan and it's not neman. Elabalabayas she'ena aser limkor kelev. That's someone he's not running a store. He went into Amazing Savings and he came out holding something under his clothing. Then the person who bought it is neman. The Amazing Saving can't say that he borrowed. Aval balabayas aser limkor kelev neman. Then he's neman. Even if it's something that's not normally sold, that we say that we don't believe the lekeach to say the person who took it to say that he bought it. If he's going out carrying something that normally you don't hold under your clothing. If it's something very valuable, a person he buys a crystal vase that could easily break. A person takes good care of it. They bundle it up inside their clothing. That neman. In that case, the lekech is neman to say that he bought it. even though it's not someone that normally sells, because the fact that he took it out hidden is not a flaw in his taina. Even if it's something that they don't normally hide it, but if it's a person who always hides something, he has a mishigas, he always keeps his things bundled up. That's what he normally does. Therefore, he's believed to say he bought it. This is all if the person who he took it from says it was borrowed, and the person who's holding it says it was bought. But if the person who he took it from says that he stole it without any excuse, and he says, no, I bought it, we don't just assume someone's a ganef. To say that he borrowed it is one thing, but say he stole it is no. This is all only by things that are normally borrowed or rented. If Reuben is saying that he borrowed it, and Shimon is saying, no, I bought it. But if it's something that you don't normally rent or borrow, we're talking about, his toothbrush, Naaman. Then, you don't usually rent or lend a toothbrush. Then the person who took it is believed to say that he bought it. The Shalach Huna Baravan, Dvar Masuin Lahash Lahaska, Vamal Kuzma, Yadi Enenem, Kihada Rava, obviously with the Safra Dagata, he took a type of scissors or a safer, Miyasmi, and he took him away from Yasmi, who were claiming that it was lent or borrowed, and the other person was saying that it was sold. Because since these are things that are normally mashal lahasker, they're believed to say that it was only lent to their father and it wasn't sold. Even this that we say that you make a shvua based on the taina that it was stolen or taken, that's not just the person himself, even his wife, even if it's a shomer, someone who's there to watch, a watchman, they could all say it because as if it was stolen from them. What if he has someone who works for him, a laborer, but he's not specifically a shomer, or he's like a sharecropper? Are they considered also that it's as if it was stolen from them, that they can make the shvua teku? That's left in a teku. What if it was something very valuable and he's saying it was stolen? So if he's a very wealthy person, or people keep their silver cups by him, so there's a reason, it's reasonable to expect that he would have such a thing. The mifkud yenish gabe, people keep by him, and that gets to make a shvua, take it. But if not, he can't make this taina that it was stolen from him. It's not believable that he really had it. Okay, we'll do nechbal as Shem either tonight, hopefully tonight. We're gonna try to learn tonight, I think. Okay, that makes you. Okay, take care.
Tomorrow.
Tomorrow we're gonna learn at 6:25, but I'm gonna try to learn tonight.